funerals. I think that's an important thing to think about. I had you guys read that article for today. And certainly when we think about that, what are the 6 purposes that are really impacted by the restrictions that exist on funerals as they are right now? And then last thing, we're just going to brainstorm a little bit. Just walk through those 6 purposes of a funeral, because what I asked you guys to do for your writing today, is to think about your own funeral and how do you facilitate within a service that those 6 purposes sort of get touched upon. How do we encourage reality? How do we encourage recall, support, expression, meaning, and transcendence? So that's basically in a nutshell. I hope to be done here in about 40 to 45 minutes. And hopefully you can all be able to engage and participate to some degree in the context of that as well. So just as we start today, I'm going to unmute you all, and we can just begin with a short prayer and then launch into that first response. All right. So as we pray today, let us remember
that we're in the Holy
I didn't shut down. Yeah, I mean, we were only a month and then it was done. So
as we begin today, help us as we strive to connect to one another.
We were
open hearts,
shut down
in our lives, and give us the strength and the courage to do your will. Help us as we talk about funerals to remember those who have lost in the midst of this coronavirus, and help us reach out to those who are engaging in the mourning process of those of having lost loved ones. We ask all of this in your name. Amen. St. John Baptist de La Salle.
Pray for us.
Forever. Right on. Thanks, guys. Always happens at some point during prayer, someone's not quite present and engaged in that background conversation. So as usual, when I do these, I'd like to just do a quick touch base of hear from each of you. Some short, quick response. And so today's really is what do you want done with your body when you die, and why? And I'm just going to go across my screen. First person on my screen, top right, is George. So George, what do you want done with your body when you die, and why?
I want to be cremated and my ashes spread like someplace special.
Do you know where that might be?
I'm thinking somewhere in the mountains.
Somewhere in the mountains, right on.
Yeah.
And why cremation opposed to like a traditional burial?
Because I don't really want to be stuck in the ground.
Don't want to be stuck in the ground. Rather be burned to a crisp.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right on. Thanks, man. Grace, how about you? What do you want done with your body?
I'm still deciding between either like donating my organs or not, but I don't know. I think I will.
Body.
What?
Donating organs or your whole body?
Just my organs. So I'll probably end up doing that because like I'm not gonna need them anymore, and then I don't really know what else.
Right on. So whatever you do, you're still deciding whether or not you want to donate those organs. Right on. All right. Thanks, Katie. How about you? Oh.
Okay. I want to be cremated and then spread at the lake where my great grandparents were spread, because like my family goes on vacation there every year and it's just like special.
That's awesome. Right on. So there's something of a tradition in that.
Yeah.
Right on. Very cool. Thanks. Olivia.
Hi.
What about for you?
I am still deciding between either being buried or being cremated and then having my ashes spread at Lover's Beach in Cabo.
Oh, Lover's Beach in Cabo San Lucas?
Yeah.
Right on. Very cool. Very cool. Right on. Thanks for sharing that. Jordan, how about for you?
I don't really know. I've been thinking like maybe like cremated and then turned into the diamonds and like the jewelry that you can give to your family members, or like spread at the beach somewhere. I'm not sure.
Right on. I also love the idea of having your ashes pressed into a record. I thought that was an interesting possibility as well. But yeah, definitely being created and being put into some sort of a family heirloom jewelry is an interesting one as well. Right on. Thanks, Jordan. Scott, how about you?
I would say probably just a normal burial because there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that like interprets cremation differently, and so I don't want to take any chances. So I would just stick with a burial.
Yeah, I remember you bringing that up in your reflection. One of the things I did want to mention is that actually for a really long time, the Roman Catholic Church was dead set against cremation and did not see it as a viable possibility for Catholics. Since Vatican II, it has really gone the opposite direction on that. Not that it encourages it, but it sees it as a possibility that if people so choose. One of the reasons is, Catholics do believe in resurrection of the body, and so that whole idea of burning up the body, led Catholics to sort of theologically question, well, how can one's body be resurrected if you destroy it at death? But it also raises the question, well, does that mean that if someone burned in a fire that they couldn't then be resurrected? So it theologically, I think we've come sort of full circle on that as a Catholic Church. So just to put that a little bit to rest as far as theologically, but as far as today, the Roman Catholic Church doesn't have an issue with cremation as a possibility. Calvin, how about for you?
I like the idea of like a kind of natural burial where it's just you decompose under the ground. And I like the idea of being shot out of a cannon like Hunter S. Thompson.
But by shot out of a cannon, like
your ashes are shot out of a cannon.
Ashes are shot out of a cannon. Okay, I have this image of a dead body flying through.
Nah.
Yeah.
Cremated and then shot out of a cannon.
Awesome. Yeah, you can actually, if you have the money, I think it costs about somewhere between $60,000 and $100,000. You can actually have your ashes shot into space. So with every time a satellite goes up, there's little vials of ash that people actually pay. It's part of the way that they fund a lot of the satellites. And so then there's, people have their cremains floating in space. So think about that.
Cool. Yeah.
Take the cannon to another level there, man. Right on. Thanks. Anna, how about you?
Oh, I thought you said someone else's name. I would probably want my like buried in like, I don't know, just a regular like in a casket, and I would probably want my ashes in Tahoe because that's like a really special place to my family. We always go there every year for my birthday, so yeah. Okay,
so you want a traditional casket funeral, but then to be cremated? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because you had a full-hand answer there.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still deciding.
Right. Awesome. Thanks. All right, Melissa, how about you? Oh, we're not getting your sound.
Okay, now do you have my sound?
Now we got you.
Okay. I want my ashes to be like injected into a willow tree seed. And then I want that willow tree to be planted. And then like in the future, my relatives could like come visit and like have lunch under the tree or something.
Interesting. I'm going to share my screen here for a second because you raised an interesting thought. Oh, shoot, I don't think I have it still pulled up. Let me go into my browser for a second. Where did I have it? Oh yeah, here they are. Okay, so give me a sec. Too many buttons to click to share my screen. All right, so this option down here on the bottom, I don't know if you can see that one, of the trees. These echo pods is something that within the last 10 years has become somewhat vogue in the environmental community. You can actually either have your ashes in that pod, or you can actually be buried sort of in the fetal position in those pods so that you actually grow to be a part of that tree. So I thought that was an interesting option. These other ones are echo pods, and this is for years kind of what I've been looking at. It's actually a recycled paper coffin. So for natural burials, it's a recycled paper coffin. I love the idea of the white one and people signing my coffin at my funeral. I've always kind of liked that idea. So, but I just thought that kind of, to piggyback on you a little bit there, plays with that idea of becoming part of a tree. Now, one of the interesting things about natural burial is that there's very few cemeteries that allow that right now. A traditional burial involves a concrete liner. So not only are you buried in a box, you're also then put into a concrete sort of tomb in the ground with a concrete lid. And the reason they do that is so that when the coffin and the body decomposes, it doesn't cause a depression. If you go to real old cemeteries, the ground is all wavy where those coffins have fallen in, and the ground sinks there. So one of the big issues, as I think was raised in that video, is that every year we're burying millions of cubic tons of concrete along with the rare hardwoods and the metal of the caskets. And so environmentalists certainly take some issue with that common practice as well. But yeah, becoming a tree is something that's great. I think there's only one cemetery in the Sacramento area, and it's down in Davis, that allows natural burials right now.
I live in Davis, so that's cool.
There you go. Right on. All right. Amy, how about you? What do you want done with your body?
I don't really care. I'll be dead, so it's just kind of up to like whoever, like my relatives, whatever they want.
So you're gonna leave it up to them?
Yeah, I'm an organ donor, so they can like donate the rest of my body if they want. I don't really care.
And no one's mentioned that yet, but donating your body to science is certainly a possibility. And so, typically the most common place that bodies are used is as cadavers for medical students. They can be used for people who are in, want to be crime scene investigators to understand decomposition and how to check those types of things. So there's all sorts of different uses, and need for people to donate their bodies to science. And more often than not, it tends to be in an educational setting that those bodies get used. Typically, after they're used, they do get cremated. And in some programs, those cremains can actually be returned back to the families. So awesome. Thanks. Ian, how about for you?
I said I wanted to be cremated and dumped in McCovey Cove behind Oracle Park.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part. Dumped where?
McCovey Cove behind Oracle Park.
Oh, right on. Okay, cool. Why there in particular? That sounds a very specific spot.
I mean, I'm a huge Giants fan. It's always been a special spot for me.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks, man. All right. Isabella.
I think I want to be cremated, but like kept in a urn, and like split between my kids, I think, because my grandpa did that and my dad has one and his brother has one. So.
Yeah, and so that idea of always having that loved one close in some way, shape.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Thanks, Iz. Madry. Not getting your audio.
Can you hear me?
Now we got it.
Okay. I used to think I'd want to be cremated, but I feel like I'd want to be buried just because I don't really like the idea of like my body like burning, and then like I'd want like to have like a gravestone so people could visit.
Yeah, and that certainly that idea of having that place where people can come and sort of memorialize you is nice. And I think that traditional burial idea is certainly a key. That's one of the attractions to it, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about cemeteries later on, but that's thanks for sharing that. Ty.
I want to be cremated, and then I want my ashes spread like at a beach, cause yeah.
Just any beach.
Yeah, I like the beach.
Right on. Thanks, Ty. Dino, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yep.
All right. We're looking at, I think, your floor or something there.
No, it's actually the top of my car.
Top of your car.
The roof. Yeah. My bad.
What do you want done?
So I probably want to go like for like a cremation, and every year, I probably want my ashes to be like spread over Anchor Bay in Gualala, California, because I've been going there every year since I was a little kid, and that's kind of like like your place, like your spot. That's my spot.
Right on.
Yeah.
All right. Very cool, man. Thank you. Okay, Andrew.
Probably just a normal burial. I don't really care about that type of stuff.
Okay, so traditional burial?
Yeah.
Now, with the traditional burial, do you want to be embalmed before you are buried? Are you hoping that there's an open casket or some sort of a viewing of you prior to your burial?
Probably not, because I've been to open casket funerals and that was kind of weird for me to see a dead body like that. So probably not.
All right, right on. Thanks. We can go BT.
I would like anything that is useful to be donated. So like organs, or like then like my body for like med students to like practice on or whatever they do with it. And then after that, anything that's left launched on like a boat, on like a wooden boat, and then lit with a flaming arrow.
So the Viking way sort of thing, yeah. Right on.
I think that'd be kind of funny.
Yeah, I don't think they allow that in most places, unfortunately.
It could just be like in someone's swimming pool. We could figure something out. Or like my cousins have a pond. We could just do it there. Just
yeah, it'd have to be definitely a private land for sure. Brian, I appreciate it. All right, Hunter, how about you?
I'd prefer to be cremated and then have my ashes divided equally between my children.
Right on. So also kind of like the idea of a small personalized urn?
Correct. Yes. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Hunter. Charlie?
I want to be cremated and just like kept in an urn.
Cremated, just a single urn, not divided?
I guess it would depend, but yeah.
And would you want that urn kept in someone's home, or would you want it stored in a columbarium, or do you want it buried?
In someone's home, yeah.
Someone's home. Right on. Awesome. Thanks. All right, Shamari. Cute dog.
Thanks.
Tell us what you want.
Huh?
What do you want?
I want to be. I'm gonna donate my body or my organs, and then I'm gonna cremate my body because burial scares me. So.
What do you want done with the cremains? What do you want done with the ashes?
I don't really know. I guess give them to my kids or like split them, as it was said earlier. So that's a good idea.
Right on.
So.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, and lastly, we got Mia.
I just want to be cremated.
Just cremated? What about, what do you want done with the cremains?
Like my children or my family.
Right on. So you want them divided?
Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Hey, thanks, you guys. I appreciate it. It's always kind of interesting to hear. I want to go back to this idea of cemeteries. I think there's a lot of people, and as I said, the idea was brought up in that SciShow that I had you guys watch, that every year we bury as a country, as a world, many, many tons of concrete and hardwoods and metals in these, not to mention the formaldehyde. Embalming bodies has been a norm in the United States, at least since the Civil War, when there was no refrigeration and they were trying to transport bodies back to people's hometowns after they died. But that practice of having an open casket funeral, that practice of displaying the body, the practice of embalming the body, of burial, particularly with the concrete liner, has become the norm. Should this be something that we continue? Does everyone in the world deserve a 3 by 6 foot plot of land for all of eternity? Or is this something, a practice that we should discontinue? The other piece of it to think about is certainly the value of land. I mean, if you look at a place like, think of East Lawn Cemetery that's in East Sac, or even City Cemetery that right on the edge of Land Park, St. Mary's that's right on the edge of, I guess that's not Tahoe Park. What is that? That's, I can't think of the name of the park that's near. Anyway, in those neighborhoods, the value of that land is immense. should that land continue to be used for cemeteries? Should we continue to use land for cemeteries, especially since we as a generation don't typically go to cemeteries all that often? I mean, I grew up, I had a great aunt who used to go every week to her parents' cemetery. My parents don't do that. I don't do that. What's your feelings of that? Are cemeteries good use of land, and should we continue this practice of burying so much and so many resources really in that context? Hunter, I'll start with you. You got your hand raised.
So yeah, I kind of believe that it's a sort of unnecessary use of land. You actually point out a great example with ESAC, how valuable that land is today. But I think it's continued today because it started hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and people are so used to it that at the end of life, it's just natural for someone to go into the ground as sort of like a remembrance. Like that's how people are remembered. Oh, he's buried there. Okay, he's gone. He's buried there. You can go visit so and so. But I think as we continue to bury people, I just think it's a more unnecessary like use of land, like you said.
Right on, thanks. Anyone else want to chime in on that, especially those of you who are interested in being buried? Ian, you got your hand raised.
I gotta agree with Hunter on it being an unnecessary use of land, but I also feel like if people really want it, it should be available, but like at a much higher price.
Yeah, it's not cheap. I think an average burial plot today will run you $5 to $6 grand in most of those cemeteries. So the casket itself can usually begins at around $2 grand, and it can be anywhere between $2,000 to $40,000. And then there's the cost of the burial in and of itself. So there's additional costs in all of that. So and in the ground burial and tombstones can probably start at about $1,000 and can go up from there. So an average in the ground burial will probably run $10,000 to $20,000, not including funeral costs. So certainly a lot of people opt to go for cremation because it does tend to be less expensive in that context. But yeah, it's certainly one of those things that it is already really quite expensive, and for a lot of people, extremely cost prohibitive. All right, Shamari had her hand raised. I don't know what happened. She just disappeared off my screen. Is Shamari still online? Unmute yourself if you are, because I don't see you. Oh,
Okay.
okay, you're okay.
Okay. I have an issue with cemeteries is that people bury their loved ones and stuff, but they don't visit them. Like that to me, that kind of like, I don't know. It just, I feel like if people visited their loved ones more often, it doesn't have to be like every day or every week, but like once a month, or like just bring flowers to their grave and just like talk to them for a set amount of time, that would make cemeteries more useful, I feel like, as if like go visit them and talk to them and just share what's on your mind. But if they don't do that, and then they're just like sitting there, nothing's happening, like what, I don't know. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I think there are some cultures. I think in cultures there are set remembrance days within. I mean, that's part of what Memorial Day is supposed to be about in the United States. It's supposed to be about time for us to go and visit, the grave sites of our loved ones and honor those who've gone before us. So there's, some cultures that do that. If you've ever seen a Jewish cemetery, when you go visit, you're supposed to put a rock on top of the gravestone, and so it's kind of neat to see these grave markers that are filled with all sorts of small rocks on top of it to symbolize those people who have come and been a part of that mourning process. But you're right. I don't think it is a big part of our current culture. We don't tend to make time in our regular yearly schedule to go and visit graves as a whole. Just by a show of hands, how many of you have been to visit a grave of a family member in the past year? Oh, a good, more of you than I would have expected, but yeah. Anyone else want to chime in on just on the whole idea of funerals? I don't want to beat this one to death, but I think it's an interesting topic. Calvin.
I think that cemeteries, in the kind of sense that we have them right now, there's probably like a problem with the usage of the land. But I think, at least for me, I don't need all the stuff that goes along with a cemetery. Like, you could just dig a hole and put my body in the hole and then put the dirt back on top and then use the land for whatever you want afterwards. I don't really need a gravestone or like anything else. So I think if people were able to like kind of scale it back a little bit, it'd be a lot better.
Yeah, I do think it's important for us to at least know where people are buried, so that if some construction comes along within a year and digs up your body, they don't think that you're the victim of some homicide. So the having a GPS coordinate or having designated areas that are somewhat protected for that, but are naturally grown, I think is kind of a cool thing. Melissa talked about tree. I think that's a cool idea too. Having some memorial tree built for you. The other part of cemeteries that I think are interesting is just the art of cemeteries. And if you've ever been through city cemetery, there's something absolutely really cool about that. It's just seeing the art that honors those people who have been laid to rest there. So, Ty, are you trying to get attention, or you? Okay, just wanted to make sure you didn't have a question. So let's move on to the next bullet point. Next bullet point, I had you guys read an article for today. It said that, one of the big impacts of the coronavirus, it has been on funerals. Right now, there's a limit. You can't have more than 10 mourners physically present. And so funerals have gone pretty much online. They've been live streamed for mourners to be present. And what I asked you guys to deal with today was what's the impact of that? When we think about the 6 purposes of a funeral, what is really getting lost in our inability to gather together for funerals? Olivia, you got your hand raised.
I would say the support one would probably be the most impacted by it, because the support is like support from people around who also knew the person who had died. So, and if all of them are online, you're not able to have support from other people who also know like what you're going through as well.
Yeah, and the very last funeral I was at was Miss Albright's father's funeral, Frank Bellatini, and it was so powerful to be in a cathedral that was packed to the gills, standing room only, really, that the support that family must have felt, knowing that their father had such a big impact. And if you limit to 10 people, you don't get that sense. You don't feel support. So I think for families, it's detrimental, but for anyone who's connected in mourning, really doesn't have that same sense of the great impact that person had, and that sense of support from the community. So I think it's got to be a lot harder to grieve right now if you lost someone than it would be any other time. Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else? Which are the other 6 purposes of the funeral? Go for it, Hunter. You got your hand raised.
Yeah, I actually agree with Liv on this one. When reading the article this morning, I noticed there was a piece about a mom who had passed away, and obviously the largest party was 10, and it said that her 4 children had to watch the live stream from their cars in the parking lot. And that got me thinking that, a funeral is the last time you really get to celebrate with the person who passed. So not being able to be there in support of them, I think is extremely difficult when it comes to a funeral.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the very first one, this idea of reality, being present, I think for so many of us, the very first time that someone's death becomes very real is when we walk into that funeral. Like, oh, this is it. This is real. And not being able to have that presence, not being able to be in the physical room with that casket or that urn is I think hard, and it makes it more difficult to start the grieving process, or for us to continue the grieving process. So right on. Thanks for sharing that. So I think you guys hit on the two big ones, right? I mean, I think that's really what's being lost in the midst of this coronavirus, and one of the things that's very difficult and very challenging for anyone who's lost someone, whether it be to the coronavirus or whether it be to something else. So I just want to walk very quickly, and I tried doing some brainstorming on this with other classes, but let me just kind of walk through this, and maybe we can end a little earlier. One of the things I want you guys to do for today, and some of you have already done it, but the final reflection for this week is really just to take a look at those 6 purposes of a funeral and to try to apply them to your own funeral, right? So how do you bring this idea of reality forthright in a funeral service? Well, just the presence of being in the presence of the casket, being in the presence of the body. That's why I think open casket funerals, I think, are powerful for people. Now, I've never really wanted an open casket funeral, and part of the reason is because in order to really have one that lasts any amount of time, you pretty much have to be embalmed. I mean, a body that's not embalmed can't stay out very long for a viewing. And I've kind of come to the reality in my own life that, gosh, I pretty much, if I die when most of my siblings are still around, I should probably get embalmed, because I can sometimes go 2 to 3 years without seeing some of my siblings. And to help it be a reality for them to be in the presence of my body and to actually sort of see me one last time would be a service to them. So even though it's not something that I necessarily want, I think there may be a good chance that, for their benefit, embalming and having some sort of an open casket for their sake to make that last sense of connection might be necessary in my own future. When we think of recall, right, what are the ways in which we want people to engage in memories? And the most traditional way to do that is through some sort of a eulogy. So, who might we have eulogize us? If you may have been to funerals where they have open mic and they allow everyone to come up and say something. I always kind of cringe when that happens, because sometimes that can go on for hours and hours and hours. But sometimes it can be really enlightening. You learn all these great things about people. I think the common thing with funerals online today is that people are doing video montages and video slideshows of that person's life. So you get a sense of that person's life. So how do you sort of bring that whole sense of recall into the service is the key question there. Support really is the obvious one that, and it's not just the service itself, but it's very common after a service to have some sort of a luncheon or some gathering of people. Those can be very simple. They can be very elaborate. I think someone in my last class mentioned that the entire funeral that they had was eating banana cream pie with talking and sharing stories about their grandma at what's the name of it? Fats restaurant. So that was something that their grandmother wanted for them, and that was that whole sense of just getting together and supporting one another. The expression is, how do you create a space that's safe for people to openly grieve? I think churches and funeral homes are spaces where people go into, and it's supposed to be this comfortable environment where it's okay to be sad, where it's okay to express grief. I've always thought that it'd be great to have my funeral in a park or some outside somewhere if it were possible, but does that really foster that sense of expression? Meaning is that whole idea of where do you bring meaning into this? In my description, video description, I said loss brings forth the ontological and our eschatological questions. The ontological questions are what we started this course with. Why am I here? What is the meaning? What is the purpose of this all? What meaning do you want to be conveyed to your mourners in that service? And how do you do that? Our Catholic traditions, the Catholic Mass and the Catholic funeral service provide that, I think, if you're a believer. That whole idea of, that life has a meaning, life has a purpose, should be conveyed somehow in our funeral services. And then the eschatological questions are, where do we go from here? And so that hope of an afterlife, that hope of resurrection, that desire, again, deeply rooted in the Catholic tradition and the funeral practices therein. And then the last thing is this idea of transcendence. And this is the hard one, because transcendence is really about how do we get people to think about their own mortality and to go forth maybe changed or renewed. The funeral mass for Catholics, that comes through the Eucharist, right? The sense of the engaging in our own need for forgiveness and an understanding of our own mortality. And so that a funeral really does help us sort of come to grips with, hey, I'm not much older than that guy or much younger than that guy that's in the box there. You know, what do I want to do with my life? How do I make my life meaningful? How do I leave here refreshed and renewed? And so I think that's a piece of this puzzle as well. And so those are just kind of the 6 pieces I want you to think about. Maybe that helps clarify a little bit about what I want you to do in your reflection that's due later today. And again, I don't get to those typically until the weekend. So if you don't get it until even tomorrow, I wouldn't really worry about it. Next week. So next week, we're going to focus on faith and religion. And those assignments are already posted. So if you guys want to work ahead, you're certainly welcome to do so. We're going to be taking a look at James Fowler's Stages of Spiritual Development. There's a really interesting article. That's a discussion between a rabbi, an imam, and an Anglican priest that we'll be reading. And then we'll be having a conversation just kind of about faith next week. And then the following week is really the last week of content that we have. And that's really the focus on the This I Believe essays. And those assignments are also already posted. So pretty much almost all of the heavy lifting that we're going to do for the remainder of the semester is already posted online. So if you guys want to go crazy and gangbusters and get some of that stuff done early, you're more than welcome to do so. The This I Believe essay is a really fun thing. And I'm going to ask that we share those in our last Zoom, actually in the Zoom at the end of that week, and maybe even in our last one if we don't get to all of them. So just a heads up on that. Do you guys have any questions? I know I just did a lot of talking here at the end. No, I can tell not. You guys are like, it's Friday, let us go already. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will be posting that introduction video for next week's a little later today, and you can look forward to that. It's an on-location one. It's kind of a fun one. And I will see you guys next week. I hope you have a great weekend. Take care, guys.
Peace.
Bye, Mr. Serb.
We'll see you guys.